We meet Lucas, who snuck out of his father's car because he was bored of waiting. After hearing several scary growls and screeches, young Lucas hurries back to his dad's pickup, just in time for his dad to find him there.
Don't put that in the glove box.
It is here that we meet Lucas's father, Frank Weaver, who is apparently at the abandoned mine to cook meth with his partner, Kenny. After he got back inside to finish packing up his supplies with his partner, both Kenny and Frank hear the same terrifying growl, but this time even louder. They had a gun with them, and assuming that it's some sort of animal because they are in the woods, they go to confront it. But what they found was a beast like no other that ends up overpowering them and killing Kenny. Fast forward 3 weeks later in the same town, we meet Julia, a small-time school teacher who has a very complicated history with the town and her family. Julia teaches at the school that Lucas attends, and it is here that we learn that Lucas is a bit of a neglected and timid child who often gets bullied.
Enters their house and eats their porridge. Then the bears come home and get angry with her.
We notice the different but somehow similar lives that both Julia and Lucas live. We see Lucas walking a very long distance home since he has no one to take him back and facing a room in his house that's bolted shut and seeming very scared to enter it. And we also see Julia resisting the temptation to buy alcohol at a supermarket while shopping for groceries. Julia lives with her brother Paul, who also happens to be the town's sheriff. She is still adjusting to being a teacher, but most of all, she is very troubled to be back in her childhood home, where she had a very toxic and sickening relationship with her father. In contrast, we see Lucas is even more troubled as he cuts the head off a doll he carries around with him everywhere for comfort. To add to the already eerie and disturbing scene, we see the door from earlier being banged from the inside and an ominous and terrifying sound coming from the other end. The next morning, it was another school day that was quite eventful as Lucas read a chilling story that he wrote for class. In it, Lucas talks about how the big bear would take care of the other two bears, but how it became much angrier and meaner after. The entire class falls silent as Lucas describes the story in his monotone voice. The excitement for the day does not end there as Lucas devises a prank on the kids who bully him, and he is then attacked by Clint, a classmate/bully. In the nurse's room, we witness just how malnourished and frail Lucas's body is. Julia attempts to phone his home to speak to his father, but to no avail. It is here that we get a glimpse of what's behind that locked room in Lucas's house. Something very strange and monstrous. After a very long and tiring day at school, Julia notices Lucas walking home and decides to follow him. She stops and sees him staring inside an ice cream shop, and after buying him some ice cream, she attempts to make friends with him but is shut down quickly.
If ice cream is your favorite vegetable.
Ice cream isn't a vegetable.
Julia was even more concerned about Lucas, and even though he told her not to follow him, she decides to drive to his house, hoping to speak to his father. But when she got there, all that was waiting for her, Roscoe, was a house that seemed like someone hadn't lived in it for months, and an ominous growl that scared her into driving back home. Meanwhile, we see Lucas still walking home and noticing crows hovering above. He then goes down to discover a dead raccoon, and we see him preparing a plastic bag and putting it inside to take it home. As the story continues to unfold, we go on to see Julia trying to make sense of what exactly is going on in Lucas's household. She took with her pieces of paper that Lucas drew on to discover disturbing drawings, and it is here we get to the bottom of what's really going on in that house, as we see Lucas preparing dinner for his family. Only it was not pasta or a burger, but chopped up parts of the dead raccoon we saw him take, and some leftover food that he found somewhere. It is here we discover that Lucas has been taking care of his little brother Aiden, who appears to be infected with something, and his father Frank, who has apparently survived the vicious and mysterious attack, but only to now become an unrecognizable monster that only feasts on flesh. After we bear witness to the monstrosity plaguing Lucas's house, we get a flashback into Julia's past and all the abuse she endured at the hands of her father as she remembers the morbid, gruesome acts of her father while playing the piano.
You're hurting.
Julia speaks to Paul about the drawings she found and about Lucas, but Paul was not surprised to hear it as he knows about Frank and how he is an addict. He goes on to explain how he always feared to one day find Frank dead with a needle in his arm. Julia can't understand why Frank was not imprisoned, but Paul goes on to explain to her that without Frank, there will be no one to take care of the boys, and social services believed he would be a fit guardian regardless of how reckless he was as a father.
I don't know. I've tried many times, but...
The next morning, we see Lucas setting up a trap for animals in the woods. He hears a sound, then goes to find a hunter who just stumbled upon a mutilated corpse. The sight horrifies the old and seasoned hunter, but looking from afar, Lucas was not all that surprised. Looking into things, Julia looks under Lucas's desk to find bizarre books on hunting, dangerous spirits, and the Bible. But what really shocked her was all the disturbing drawings she would find depicting unspeakable acts of violence and blood. She takes this to the principal, Ellen, who tells her that there is not much that they can do as child negligence is prevalent in their small town that's been a victim of methamphetamine use. Julia tries her best to convince Ellen to do something, but the best she gets out of her is that Ellen says she will try and speak to Frank when she can.
I tell you what, next chance I get, I will reach out to his father.
Word about the disfigured corpse hits the town, and Julia hears about it from her brother, who was more than a little uncomfortable to hear about what the hunter found in the woods. Both Julia and her brother feel vexed and puzzled.
Already part of a man in the woods today.
Part of a man?
Turning back to Lucas's, we see him taking care of his very sick and malnourished brother Aiden, who asks his brother about God. Lucas offers the only thing he had, a bag of chips, and then goes on to remind his brother about their mother and offers him some comfort to soothe his dire situation. After some investigation, the body that was found in the woods is identified as belonging to Kenny Glass, Frank's partner, who was killed by the mysterious creature. At the morgue, Paul and his partner were more than a little shaken up to hear that an animal did not do this, since the bite marks on the body were consistent with human teeth.
No animal that I've ever seen.
True to her word, Ellen drives up to Lucas's household to speak to his father, Frank. The house seemed empty and the door was unlocked. Pressing on, Ellen goes inside the house calling on Frank, but there was no one that responded. As she slowly keeps walking inside the house, she hears the faint cries of a child coming from the room with many locks on it. She removes the locks, goes inside to discover Aiden, frightened and hungry. But the moment she goes down to pick him up, Frank attacks her from behind. He tackles her to the ground and begins to take bites and chunks out of her as she screams in agony. And in a matter of moments, Ellen was dead, and Frank, or whatever monster that was now in control of him, transforms into its full form and bursts out from his body. Meanwhile, at the town, Paul and the police, with the help of the hunter, were able to locate Kenny's remains in the mine where all of this started. Inside the very damp and dark mine, they discover a bunch of weird things like protection bags and spells belonging to Native Americans.
What are these?
Medicine bags, wards.
Things begin to ramp up pretty quickly after. We see Lucas's bully Clint being attacked by a horrifying monster after he follows him to beat him up. Getting back home, Lucas discovers the chaos at his house and begins to clean up to hide all the blood and carnage. The next day, Clint's mother reports him missing, and Julia realizes that there is a connection between Ellen and Clint's disappearance. She goes to Lucas's house to discover Ellen's car, and after getting a warrant to search the premises, Paul and the rest of the police discover the aftermath of a monster.
Jesus Christ.
Lucas is taken to the hospital, and as Julia tries to convince her brother that they should be the ones caring for him now, since he has no one, we see a flashback of what has happened after his father was attacked by the strange creature. Frank got very sick after and told his kids to stay away, but it was not long after that Aiden was also infected. And that was how Lucas was left between a rock and a hard place.
Daddy's very, very sick.
Looking into things deeply, Julia and Paul go to visit the hunter, who happens to be a Native American, and tells them that what they are dealing with is a diabolically evil creature called the Wendigo, and that it can only be killed if it's stabbed in the heart. Paul did not want to believe all this, but that same night, they discovered Clint's body, which was also heavily mutilated. At Julia's house, we hear Lucas talking about his other dad and how he will come to get him. As he says this, the Wendigo attacks and Sheriff Dan is killed. As Julia attempts to protect Lucas from the creature outside, Paul gets to the location and attempts to confront it, but unfortunately the beast attacks him severely and knocks him unconscious. Both Lucas and his brother Aiden were gone. Julia knows that the Wendigo has taken them to its sacred ground, which is the mine, and she does the best she can to help her wounded brother. She gets him inside the car, and they both drive to the mine to confront the beast and save the two boys. Julia walks deep into the mine on her own to find Lucas and his brother, and after some searching, she was relieved to find them, but unfortunately, she also finds the Wendigo feasting on a dead grizzly bear. The Wendigo attacks, and she does all she can to defend herself. After using a flare to blind the beast and stabbing it in the chest with a crowbar, she gets help from behind from the small and scared Lucas, who stabs the Wendigo with his knife. Finally, after a terrifying battle, Julia manages to kill the Wendigo, but unfortunately for Lucas's brother Aiden, he begins to turn just like his father did, and the dark magic of the Wendigo begins to take effect. Noticing his transformation, Julia had no choice but to turn her blade against Aiden to finally be rid of this evil monstrosity once and for all. And finally, with a heavy heart, Julia kills Aiden as Lucas was forced to be there, painfully witnessing his own brother's death. In the last and final scene, we see that Julia was now the one taking care of Lucas as his guardian. Things seem to have taken a good turn, but our story leaves us with a scene that makes us doubt the ending, as we witness Paul, who has been injured by the Wendigo, coughing up a strange, dark, gooish substance, almost as if now he has become infected too. The film does a great job of intertwining the thrilling horror story with the lives of the characters. The contrast between the adult Julia and the young boy Lucas, both of whom enduring abuse in their household and dealing with it in different ways, is an exciting story to follow.